Norfolk. We know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. Norfolk, 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 Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. With hard work we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. Norfolk,
If we can find our seats, I'd like to start, please, and thank you. Okay, I make the time 5 o'clock. It's time for our public meeting on our applications. We have 5 before us this evening. I will now officially open the public meetings held under the Planning Act and the Municipal Act and Norfolk County Policy. I advise those in attendance that the Ontario Municipal Board has the power under the Planning Act to dismiss an appeal to either a zoning bylaw and/or an official plan amendment if the appellant does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or does not make a written submission to Norfolk County Council before the zoning bylaw is passed and/or the official plan amendment is adopted. We will deal first with staff report FS 17-34. This concerns recommendations for cancellation, reduction, or refunding of taxes under sections 357, 358, 359 of the Municipal Act, August of 2017. I officially open the public meeting respecting the staff report 1734. James, are you Sue? James. Thank you. And I just might add, staff, we are on, in your agenda, we are on page 131. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry for the delay. This is a regular report that needs a council resolution in order to reduce taxes levied for properties that have had a significant change that would affect their assessment, or if there's been a gross manifest error in their assessment. This is part of the public meeting as per the Act. The public notice of the public meeting was sent to each affected property owner on August 8th, 2017, providing the notice period required in the Act. If there's any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, James. Council members, any questions to our treasurer? Not at this time. Is there anyone in attendance who wishes to speak to an aspect of the report? And if so, you may come forward to the microphone. Hearing none, council, any further discussion? I'd like a mover and a seconder to close Wells and Height. Have moved and seconded that we now close this public meeting. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Recommendation is printed there for you on page 131. What's your wishes, council? Councillor Oliver?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the recommendation in the report.
Thank you, sir. Seconder? Councillor Brunton? Oliver has moved. Brunton has seconded. That's okay. Oliver has moved. Brunton seconded that report FS 1734, the recommendations for cancellation, reduction, refunding of taxes under sections 357, 358, 359 of the Municipal Act of August 2017 be received as information, and that council approve these cancellation, reduction, and refunding of taxes. Any discussion? Those in favor? Carried. Councillor Geisens, is my microphone off? Can you hear me? Yeah, nobody home here.
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Here. Thank you. Anyhow, I can talk loud. Hey, I'm back. Okay. You sure fixed me, didn't you? Thank you, sir. Okay, on to the next This is staff report, DCS 1759. An application was received. This is to construct an accessory building. There's quite a bit of relief being asked for here, 2 meters from the permitted height, 16.4 feet to permit the height of 7 meters at 23 feet, and 78.8 square meters from the 848.2 square feet from the maximum permitted usable floor area of 55 square meters, which is 592 square feet. This is to permit a usable floor area of 133.8 square meters and 0.33% from the maximum permitted lot coverage of 10% to permit a lot coverage of 10.33%. Scott Peaver has put forth the application affecting the lands described as 22 O'Rourke Ave in Port Dover. I now open this public meeting upon staff report 1759. How are you, Alicia? Okay? I know it's not Alicia. Shannon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
All you girls have blonde hair and I get you confused.
We like to throw you for a loop from time to time.
Well, you put Alicia's name on here and then the two of you sit there and smile at me. Thank you, Shannon. Shannon Van Dalen, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and public. This is the presentation relating to a proposed accessory building for the property at 22 O'Rourke Street in Port Dover. The subject lands currently contain an existing dwelling, and as stated, the proposal is to seek relief for the construction of an accessory building in the rear yard. The property is surrounded by existing residential development, and the relief requested is for the height, the lot area, and the lot coverage. I would also like to note that as part of the report and presentation, there is a small change to the height. Originally stated, the bylaw included a height of 7 meters. However, the proponent has actually requested a height of 7.32 meters, which equates to 24 feet even, which works a little bit better with the roof trusses and the height. As stated, the proposed accessory building would be located in the rear yard, set back at the corner. There's an existing single detached and an existing shed. The existing shed would be removed to be replaced with the proposed accessory building. The application was circulated to the various departments and agencies as well as members of the public, and there was no concerns received from any of the various circulated processes. Based on the foregoing, staff are recommending support of the proposed zoning application, and I would be happy to answer any question on Alicia's behalf if you have any. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I read this yesterday, and I must say I was quite surprised when I read this and looked at the height. We're looking at 23 feet as an accessory building, and I guess my first question is this usual that we permit 23 feet in building height in town?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is something that we have evaluated in the past, and it's something that we look at on a site-by-site specific basis to evaluate the proposal as it stands and the surrounding uses. In this time, the building would be set back at the rear of the property, and there is a pathway beside it as well as some mature trees. So in terms of the visual impact, is considered to be negligible because there is a separation to any adjacent residential uses.
And with a building this height, we are not permitting living quarters in the top part or anything, are we?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that would not be permitted. It would be for accessory purposes only and for storage.
And to the best of your knowledge, there has been no public outcry with regard to the size of this building, the height?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, no. Through the process and the circulation, there was no comments or any concerns received to the Planning Department based on this application.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Mayor, as I said, I went up yesterday and spoke to the applicant because I was surprised at the height, and he pointed out right across the road, right across this fence, there's another building almost the same size. I live in Dover, I didn't even know we had these tall buildings. I got to get out more. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification to the planner. Talks about this building would occupy 1,440 square feet, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Right. And when you look at the lot size is only 0.16 acres. So I calculated that out, and basically the overall lot size is 6,820 square feet, and the building would be 1,440 square feet. So that works out to over 20% lot coverage, and the report says it's 10.33. So I'm just confused as to what the real numbers are.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the coverage, it's also calculated based on the building envelope, so the footprint of the building, not necessarily if there's calculation in terms of 2 stories or the single floor footprint.
Okay, so those numbers are correct in the report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Thank you very
yes.
much. Just the lot looked kind of small, 0.16.
Any further questions? Councillor Black?
Mayor Luke, and through you to Shannon, and just curious myself, same as Councillor Wells, about the height. What is the general height of the neighborhood, of the houses in the area? It'd be a lot less than that, would it not be? Are they mostly like single story, and do you have an idea what sort of the average height of a home is?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the height, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. But based on a review of the neighborhood, the houses are typically a single story or a single 1.5 stories. In terms of generally, it's kind of some of your story and a half or elevated ranches. So they're a little bit above kind of your standard 1-story dwellings.
But they would be shorter than this accessory building, would they not be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in some respects, some of them could be. Again, just depending on the roof pitches and the building layouts themselves, but some could be shorter than this accessory structure, yes.
Okay, well, the point I'm trying to get at is character of the neighborhood. So you feel, I guess you do feel, because you're recommending support of it, that it fits in with the neighborhood, the general characteristics, which would include size and height and all that stuff. So you feel that it fits in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, as the proposed accessory building would be set back to the rear of the lot line, so it's going to be removed from the front fascia of the street. So you're not really going to have a visual impact when you're driving along Aurora Street. As well, you have some separation to the adjacent residential dwellings. There are some mature trees which would soften the appearance of it, as well as a pathway that runs adjacent to the property line.
Any further questions for staff? Not at this time, okay. Is the applicant Scott Beaver or an agent in attendance? Scott? Okay, thank you. I'll be right with you. Does anyone wish to speak in favor of this application? And Scott, if you wish to speak in favor of it, you certainly get the honors to speak. You don't have to. It's up to you. You're okay? Thank you. Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone in attendance who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? Please come to the microphone. Council, anything further? Councillor Wells, please. I will. Just as soon as I close the public meeting, I'll get to you. Thank you. I need a mover and seconder to close this public meeting. Geisens and Wells have moved and seconded. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting this application, and the reason for that, as I mentioned, I was up and had a view, although I thought it was quite high. It is kind of protected from the trees. It's very, once it is built, most people will not see it from the road. You'll not see it from the side unless you're right there. And the walkway, it's public property anyway, so I will support this application.
Seconder? Columbus?
Yes.
Councillor Wells, do you wish to speak to this motion?
No, sir. I think I did that already.
Yeah, I think you did out of order and you got away with it.
Well, that's
fine.
okay. It's the mayor.
Yeah, he's sleeping a little bit up here. Wells has moved, Columbus has seconded, that the application by Scott P. for 22 O'Rourke Avenue in Port Dover affecting the lands described as Lot 11, Plan 355, Geographic Township of Woodhouse in Norfolk County. This is to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw 1Z 2014, and the file number is printed. It's recommended for approval for reasons as set out in the report 17-59, and that no public input has been received for this application, and therefore will not be considered as part of the decision. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And Shannon, thank you for doing Kayla's report for her. Okay, let's move on. We're now going to deal with staff report DCS 17-60. This application is received to rezone the subject lands from urban residential to urban residential, R2 to R3, urban residential R2 to R3. This is to recognize the existing triplex on the subject lands. The application also requires relief of following existing deficiencies: 1.15 meter from the required front yard setback of 6 meters to allow a setback of 4.85 meters. Relief of 3 parking spaces from the required 7 spaces to permit parking spaces. Antonio Borges and Santos and Maria Cristina Santos and Agent William Christopher Nunn have put forth the application affects the lands described as 283 Cedar Street here in the former town of Simcoe. I do now open the public meeting upon staff report 17-60. Kayla, I will let you give your report. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. So this is an application to rezone the subject lands from R2 to R3, and also for existing deficiencies for the front yard setback and for parking spaces. To the best of planning staff's knowledge, the triplex is an illegal use, and this application will simply be bringing the property into compliance. The applicants have provided staff documentation suggesting that the triplex has been in this R2 zone since 1983. Therefore, the purpose of this application is simply to bring the existing use into conformity with the Norfolk County zoning bylaw. Planning staff are of the opinion that the existing setback and parking deficiencies is appropriate in this instance. There is at least 1 parking space for each unit and additional visitor parking located on site and on the street. The dwelling is in keeping with in line with the other dwellings along Cedar, and the property is buffered by fencing along the rear and side yards. There have been no concerns raised by the neighboring property owners. So planning staff are of the opinion that it is appropriate to recognize the deficiencies in this instance. The R3 zone is subject to site plan control, so any substantive development or addition to the property would be subject to review of these details. It is the professional opinion of planning staff that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and the official plan, and planning staff recommend approval of the application.
Thank you very much. Kayla, Rel, Council, Mr. Black, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, through you to staff. And you mentioned that they could park on street. I'm not sure. I go by there every day, probably 2 or 3 times. I don't think the parking is allowed in the street out front. Is it or is it not?
Through the mayor, I believe it is on the other side of Cedar. I did see parking.
Other side?
Correct.
I don't know if it is there either. I think people use that as a double lane, but maybe. Well, the reason I'm asking this question, because I do think it would be a problem if they're parking on the street. Like, I don't have any problem with the 3 units, and maybe they could park around the street. That would be fine, but if they start parking on the street, I think that's going to be a problem.
Further questions to staff? Response, Lee?
Through the mayor to council, our understanding is that it has been currently used as a triplex for in excess of 20-plus years, and we have zero complaints about the parking from that. And it is in close proximity to two side streets where parking is permitted, so it hasn't been a problem, and I would contend that it would not continue to be a problem.
Thank you for that. Further, council? Is the applicant Antonio or Maria Santos or the agent in attendance? Mr. Bill Culver, you're the agent? Thank you. Get to you in a moment if you wish to speak. Got to follow the protocol. Does anyone present wish to speak in favor of this application? And Mr. Culver, if you wish to speak, we always give the applicant or agent first shot. Is there anyone else in attendance that wishes to speak in favor of this application? Excuse me. Is there anyone in attendance who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? Anything further from council? Councillor Wells.
Very much, Mr. Mayor. Just listening to Councillor Black, and I had that written down as well, parking on the street. Could I ask the Simcoe councillors, have they had any complaints about parking on the street? Because parking in Dover is a pretty serious issue.
Like I said before, I go by there probably 4 times a day, and I haven't experienced any problems along there. The only problems that I've ever experienced is, on the south side of the road, people are using that as 2 lanes, and then every once in a while somebody parks there and messes it all up, but not on that spot.
Yeah. Thank you. Mover seconder to close this public meeting, please. Sonnenberg and Geisens, those in favor? Thank you. Staff report is printed, or the recommendation is printed on the report on page 147. Your wishes, council. Councillor Columbus?
So move the recommendation.
Thank you. Black seconds. Columbus has moved, Black has seconded that the application by Antonio Borges, C. Santos and Maria Cristina Santos, 22 Warrad Avenue in Simcoe, affects the lands described as Lot 3, Block 43, Plan 182. This is in the urban area of Simcoe. This is to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw 1Z 2014 for reasons set out in the report number DCS 17-60. Discussion. Those in favor of approval? It's carried. Thank you. We'll go to page 160 now. This is staff report, DCS 17-62. Thank you. We have received an application to amend Norfolk County official plan to adopt a secondary plan for the North Dover Mills planning area in Port Dover. The proposed amendment is for the first phase of the secondary plan for the planning area. The first phase of the proposal includes 119 single-detached, 44 semi-detached, and 23 units of street houses. The proposal also includes blocks for parkland and stormwater management. George Eggink and the agent Douglas Valley Limited has put forth the application affecting the lands described as 81 Dover Mills Road in Port Dover. I will now open the public meeting upon staff report 17-62. Kayla, please.
Thank you. So the purpose of this application is a neighborhood plan or a secondary plan to provide a framework for the North Dover Mills secondary area to develop as a complete and sustainable community. This application is the first step in the process of developing the subject lands, and a draft plan of subdivision and a zoning amendment will follow if this amendment is approved. The map on the screen shows the entire North Dover Mills area, comprising both red and green areas. A total of 110 acres with frontage on Dover Mills Road and a small portion of frontage along Prospect Street in Port Dover. The lands are actively farmed at this time. A secondary planning area should consider new development while remaining conscious and sensitive to the established community as a whole. The plan will guide future development in this area to happen in an integrated and sustainable manner. Usually, secondary plans are completed by the municipality in the form of an RFP or by one developer as a whole. However, in this case, only the subject lands, which are shown in red, currently have potential for development. The county has discussed options with other landowners of North Dover Mills with no success for inclusive development. Therefore, the North Dover Mills planning area is unique in the sense that it is comprised of 3 separate large parcels fronting onto North Dover Mills Road, all of which are under separate ownership. The area also includes a small portion, which is landlocked, with no frontage, and is also under separate ownership, shown on the map in green. The applicant wishes to develop the parcel as outlined in red for residential purposes. When evaluating the application, the following key considerations were taken into account by planning staff. The type of uses. So residential uses are the primary use foreseen in this area. There's been no need for commercial or industrial lands that are anticipated at this time. The applicant has shown a variety of residential forms and densities. Through discussion with the school boards, no additional lands are required for schools in this area. Secondly, we looked at the road networks and infrastructure. This was a key component of the review. All logical road connections and connectivity are shown, except for a road stub for lands to the west. Although unknown at this time, there is potential for urban boundary expansion through the next OP review, and it is important that a connecting road link be included to ensure connectivity throughout. Map 6 of the report shows a road connection to the west. Further infrastructure requirements regarding roads, water, stormwater, and wastewater are noted through the Public Works and Environmental Services comments. These details will be required at the draft plan of subdivision and zoning stage of the proposed development. Parks and recreation. A key component of a sustainable community is the inclusiveness of green space and parklands. The applicant has provided some parkland to meet the needs of North Dover Mills, and parkland calculations will be required at the draft plan stage. The natural environment. So you can see north of the subject lands, there is significant woodlot, and this would require an environmental impact study to be completed at the draft plan stage, and this is to ensure the protection of the natural heritage feature. And finally, connectivity. So the applicants have included one walkway connection within the subject lands, and connectivity is encouraged throughout to ensure a walkable community. It should be noted that I have received several phone calls and emails from abutting neighbors in anticipation of future development taking place within this community. Many of the concerns deal with the existing drainage problems that landowners along Dover Mills are experiencing. Although this application does not deal with specifics related to grading and drainage, it is important to consider this when working through the draft plan of subdivision stage. Other concerns noted from the community focused on the design and the layout, and many of these are valid, and the changes to the design at the draft plan stage can address many concerns. Further detailed studies, such as a traffic study, will need to be completed before these design stages and final designs can be brought back to the community for input. The community will have another chance to look at the details after the further studies are completed. The emails and letters have been attached to this report for council. In summary, the official plan requires a neighborhood plan for North Dover Mills. The applicant has submitted supporting materials that are comprehensive in scope, considering matters of integration with adjacent urban lands. These details are sufficient to ensure sustainable development patterns and the public interests. Planning staff recommend approval subject to the requirements of a road stub to the west in a conceptual area servicing report.
Thanks, Kayla. Council members, questions? Councillor Black and then Wells and Oliver.
Yeah, well, I've had some calls on this property as well, and they were similar in nature about drainage, about buffering, about the woodlot. And the woodlot to the north there, that would be part of Norfolk County's parkland, so it would be kind of a recreational area for the general public after it was fully developed.
Through the chair, our Community Service Division is working with the applicant to discuss possibilities. It is my understanding that the applicant does not want to keep those woodlands, and so Norfolk County is considering looking at taking on ownership. Whether or not they become parklands is unknown at this time, but it would be a way to preserve and link that existing woodlot.
Okay, and so there's some potential there for public use or recreational use, walking, birding, that type of thing. The drainage, I know I've had some concerns from the people on Dover Mill Road there, and I've been down myself, and I can see some of the properties, the water just doesn't seem to go away, or it goes away the wrong way. I don't know if there's any drainage up there now at all, but will this development deal with, Dover Mills Road and some of the other properties that are experiencing problems? Like, would there be a drainage system there? And where is the outlet? I guess it would go from that subdivision into that pond, the retention pond, and then from the retention pond, where's the outlet go?
Through the chair, I will turn that question over to Lee in Public Works.
Through the mayor to council. With respect to the drainage concerns, at this point, it's premature to give you an exact location for the outlet and all that sort of stuff, as the stage that we're at right now doesn't really look into that in detail. The applicant has provided us with sufficient information so that we're satisfied that there is one or more appropriate outlets for their water. The details of that will be explored during the further planning applications that are taking place. We are aware of some of the difficulties that the residents on the south side of Dover Mills Road are experiencing, and those are being addressed through the other subdivisions to the south and will also be addressed as part of the development of these lands on the north.
Okay, it's not just the south. There's a couple on the north there that aren't being drained properly. That's where I got my calls from.
Yep, certainly, and those will all be looked at. Drainage is extremely important. It's one of the comments that Public Works has made back to the applicant with respect to future applications is that they need to provide us with a comprehensive drainage plan for the entire area. Again, though, at this stage of the planning process, it's premature to ask for detailed design.
Yeah, but nonetheless, it'll have to be addressed. So those problems eventually will be dealt with.
Absolutely, it must be.
Okay, thank you for that. And then one last thing, some of the existing properties up here are concerned about buffering. So when this development occurs, would there be any buffering between the new development and some of the existing homes that back onto the new development proposal?
Through the chair, yes, that is definitely a valid concern that I've heard from neighbors, and we can deal with buffering at the draft plan of subdivision stage, and we can work with the landowners to ensure that it's appropriate and works with both the agent or the applicant and the landowners.
Okay, and any idea what the buffering might look like? Would it be kind of a vacant piece of land, or would there be vegetation, or would it be fencing?
Through the chair, it would typically be fencing that
Okay.
we would use for buffering.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, might I ask, you mentioned the word road stub. Could you explain what a road stub is and what the intent is of this road stub, please?
Through the chair, yes. So in the presentation, I did mention a road stub to the west. As you can see, there is a small portion identified. I'm just going to go back one. So If you're looking at the map, you can see on the west there's a small portion in green identified as the balanced lands. These lands are within the urban boundary and are set for residential development. So the purpose of the road stub is to allow for future access to these lands, and also because as the next official plan review takes place, there is possibility for the expansion of the urban boundary. And although we don't know where exactly this will take place, there is potential that the urban boundary may expand in this area. So it's very important that we consider the road stub to the west as a second access to the subject lands and the further Dover Mills development as a whole.
Or are you suggesting that where the road stub you're suggesting to be, but there will be no development there until the zone where you have it agreed, am I correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Where do the cars that are in that subdivision, where do they access them? If they don't go on to Eastdale, where are they coming out of that new subdivision?
Through the chair, the only other access point then would be Dover Mills and Prospect. And the details of those access points will come at the later stage when a traffic study has been completed to determine where those access points will be.
Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions to staff, and I apologize for my back, Kayla, being to you. First of all, with respect to the significant woodlands that Councillor Black, I think, was asking about to the north, and if the county is contemplating, if the developer makes the land available to us, that we might agree to take title, we don't currently own any land on any side of this development. Is that correct? Other than the streets, obviously, to the south. But my point is, we don't own any of the other adjacent significant woodland areas touching this property, or do we?
Through the chair, currently no, but the swim pond and parkland is located in front of the significant woodlot. So it is my understanding that there would be access for our forestry division to enter through the parkland and swim pond area.
Okay. All right. And that's something I guess we'll deal with at a later date then. My other real question, Mr. Mayor, when I first put my hand up for you to give me a chance, relates to staff's comment about the fact that it's been decided there would be no need for any commercial type development in any part of this. I mean, this will be quite a large subdivision up here in the north end of town. And other than coming all the way down to Prospect and then to Highway 6 and over to the no frills, do you not feel there would have been some value possibly in having at least a small parcel within the development identified as commercial for a neighborhood variety store or something of that sort? Or how do we decide whether we do or we don't need that with a development of this scale?
Through the chair, the lands are designated urban residential. So at this time, we haven't identified a need for commercial or industrial, but there is possibility through future phases of development that through the zoning application, they could do a neighborhood commercial zone to sort of accommodate those needs as the community builds out.
Councillor Black?
Question on housing affordability. I know when we have staff here talking about housing in some of the subdivisions in Simcoe, I know the Harvest Glen and different ones always kind of seem to have an affordable housing component, like an area outlined in the subdivision agreement or in the development for affordable, specifically for affordable housing. Is there anything in this development to accommodate that sort of thing?
Through the chair, the planning report, page 5, does have comments from our housing services. The application at this time proposes singles, semis, and townhouses. And the comments from our housing services do note that there are second dwelling units permitted within these areas, and that does provide the potential for rental options.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Columbus.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kayla, one of the concerns that I read about was the water pressure in the area is currently low. Will this further reduce the pressure, this development? For
Through the
water?
chair, I will turn that over to Lee.
Through the mayor to council, as part of the detailed design, certain things will have to be implemented to ensure that the water pressure, we do not have a problem with the water pressure. Again, at this point, it's very premature to say what would be required of that development, but it is something that staff are certainly aware of and will be addressing through the appropriate phases of the development. But at this point, the details of how that would be addressed, they've provided several alternatives that can be more further explored through the appropriate stages of the development applications.
Anything further? Okay, thank you. I see the agent, Mr. Valley, is in attendance. Is the applicant here as well, Mr. Eglin? Welcome. Anyone wish to speak in favor of this application? And as always, Mr. Valley, if you wish to speak first, you may go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I'm just looking for remote control. Don't have a remote control. While I'm waiting for staff to grab that for me. I do have a handout, which I'll pass a few each direction. Thank you. There should be plenty there for council as well as members of staff. So we are here today to talk about this application for a secondary plan, or otherwise known as neighborhood plan. Those terms seem to get used interchanged every once in a while, but you've heard the report from planning, and we agree with most of the comments that have come forward, but we do have concern with a few things. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk to you, first introduce my clients. George and Betty Eggink are over here in the gallery. Members of council are certainly familiar with me. Been here too long and spoken for too many hours, but thank you, Councillor Wells. Don't even need to look over. I know who's clapping. We're going to give you a little background information on our application and what we've done to date. The approvals process, I think it's really important for council to understand what we're actually applying for here and where we are in that overall process. We're going to talk a little bit about the connection to the Lawrence land. That was the land to the west that your planner spoke about, and the need for that connection. We also want to talk to you about the requirement or the non-requirement for further engineering studies on land that our developer does not own. And we believe that we should restrict our studies to what we own because of the work we've done to date. We have some suggestions and some requests that we would ask of council to give direction back to staff. And then, of course, we're here for question and answer. So, a little bit of background. We first met with the county staff back in April of 2016. So we've been bouncing this around with staff back and forth for about a year and a half with quite a few meetings. There have been meetings, in fact, with the landowners immediately to the east, which is the big portion of land immediately adjacent to us, and they have confirmed to us and to your staff that they have absolutely no interest in developing, and they are not receptive to any discussion on developing of their land. We have completed a servicing study, which has been submitted and reviewed. We have completed a planning justification, which has been submitted and reviewed, and we've gone through numerous outlines of different subdivision layouts that could be submitted potentially for a draft plan of subdivision. However, as your planning staff has pointed out, that's the next step, and we're not here to talk about subdivision layout today. There have been a lot of meetings, let's put it that way, a lot of meetings with your staff regarding this secondary plan and how we would approach it. So this is, I put this up at my own risk here because this is the layout that is conceived for the subdivision. Over to the far right is Dover Mills Road. Across the bottom here is Prospect Street. And this is the limit of the land that is subject to this application. Again, this is a potential draft plan of subdivision. This layout has been reviewed with staff. It's the evolution of a number of discussions with staff. We've color-coded it a little bit here so you can get a flavor of what we're envisioning, where these, if you call tan lands, these would be single-family dwellings, which would be the majority of the land use. These, I suppose, turquoise properties in here would all be semi-detached houses, so 2 dwellings per lot. Red would be townhouses, and then over here, a blue area for stormwater management pond, and then all this green space would be a combination of park, and the park would end about there. So to the right of my red pointer is park, and then this area back here is the woodlot that was referred to, and the developer has indicated that he would like to give that to the municipality. If you read Community Services comments in there, they're very interested in exploring that. We've pointed out to them, if there is ever any action on either side, that this could be a nice connectivity and linkage of a woodlot that would be beneficial to the municipality. So that is the general layout. Please keep in mind, we're not here to talk about what's on the screen, but this is something that the municipality asked us to give us their vision as part of our application for secondary plan. So, the approvals process. You can see by all the arrows there's a few steps. We're up here at the top. We're talking about the secondary plan, that's neighborhood plan. It's a planning document. It's not proposing specific land uses and specific densities and all those kinds of things. It's saying we want to develop residential subdivision in this area. There's going to be a mix of land uses. Generally, the stormwater pond is going to be in this area and so on. But it's not what you're used to getting as a draft plan of subdivision, which sets down lot sizes and lot configurations and road patterns and all those kind of detailed road patterns. It does set down the overall road pattern. So where are your primary streets and your primary connection points, but not the intricacies of the internal roadways. So here we are, secondary plan / neighborhood plan. The next thing that we'll go to, once we get the secondary plan approved, is a draft plan of subdivision with approval conditions. And this is what council's very familiar with. Most subdivisions come to you at the draft plan stage. And your council's familiar, this is when there's a list of 30, 40, 50, 60 conditions on draft plan approval from all the agencies that ultimately have to be cleared. We can't get to that draft plan approval stage until we get through the secondary plan. So we're here. This is a whole step that I don't think council is normally used to taking a subdivision through. Once the draft plan is approved and all those conditions are set, then of course there's a zoning bylaw amendment that has to be approved to implement the zoning required for the draft plan. Once that is done, then we go into detailed design, and this is where Lee Robinson has spoken to you about detailed design for servicing and drainage and grading and stormwater management and all those things. So that detailed design goes along with agency review. There's numerous agencies that have to be consulted, the MOE, the Conservation Authority, all the county departments and so on. All those agencies have to be, we have to get approval from all of them. Once we do that, we're then able to satisfy those 30, 40, 50, 60 conditions that council approved back up at step 2, draft plan approval. And once we have those all signed off, then we can finally start to build something, put some services in the ground and obtain building permits for houses. The purpose in showing you this slide is to recognize that we are at step 1 of a 6-step process here, and we can't get too involved with the details and the nitty-gritty. We're talking about a secondary neighborhood plan, which is an all-encompassing, broad-brush planning document. So, I want to talk to you a little bit about the connection to the Lawrence property. So, as your planning staff said, this red piece is the land that my client owns, and this little green piece over here is what we're referring to as the Lawrence property. Now, the Lawrence property, this is map 5, by the way, that's from your planning report. It's the county's map. The Lawrence lands are actually part of a much larger piece. They're frequently referred to, in fact, you heard it tonight, that they're landlocked. They, in fact, are not landlocked. This piece is one piece with
this big tract of land up here, it's all one piece of property according to the county website. The line that's drawn here is simply to indicate that above the line is not in the urban boundary. Below the line is in the urban boundary. So you've got this little tiny sliver of land in here that's in the urban boundary, but is part of a much larger land tract to the north. So again, the majority of the Lawrence land are outside the urban boundary. It's a very narrow strip, which makes it very difficult to develop. And staff have asked that we make a road connection to provide access and servicing to those lands. And obviously, this is a concern for our client. So the Lawrence lands are only about 1.2 hectares. So it's a very small little piece of property. According to Google Earth, it's only about 68 meters wide. Now, the county won't let us do any kind of development with a dead end. That's not permitted, so there has to be a turnaround circle. The turnaround circle that's required is 40 meters wide. So you have a piece of property that's 68 meters wide, 40 of it goes to a turnaround. That leaves you with very little property on either side for lotting and so on. You can see how the land is almost too small to develop. Even if you didn't have to have that big 40-meter turning circle, the road itself is 20 meters. That only leaves 24 meters on either side for lots. 30 is about the minimum to meet your zoning bylaw requirements. So the property is very small. And keep in mind, it is part of a larger tract to the north, and we believe that it should be developed as part of that larger tract to the north if and when an urban boundary expansion is ever made. What's the cost to my client to provide this road stub to the Lawrence lands? We've put a number of $270,000. Where does that come from? By rejigging the lots as required to do this, we would lose either 1 or 2 lots at $100,000 a piece. That's what they're selling for now in the market. Plus, there's the cost to actually build the road at $2,000 a meter, 35 meters long, $70,000. So it would cost this client, this developer, $270,000 to provide a stub road and servicing for lands that may not be developable and which are in fact part of a much larger tract that they could be serviced with. It's a high cost to bring the services to a parcel of land that's a real challenge to develop, and we have concern with that. We are proposing stub lands on the other side of our property, going to the east, recognizing that it's a big portion of land and that there is obviously great development potential over there, even though the current owners are not interested in that. So we refer you to the amendment, the official plan amendment, that is contained much deeper in your agenda, but this is the mapping that's contained within that. And in this mapping, right there is the Lawrence lands, and you can see that staff have taken our drawing that we proposed, and they've edited it to show this road here and to show this road pattern within our land, our subdivision. This is a concern to us. This is proposed to go straight into the Norfolk County official plan. It shows that road connection. It shows the internal road pattern, which does not match our proposed subdivision layout that we've worked with staff to develop. So it shows that internal road. And if these roads do not match with what we bring you for a draft plan of subdivision as our next step, we're going to have to go back and apply to amend this document, because this document says that there has to be a road in that configuration. Well, that's not the configuration that we've worked to develop with your staff. So we would ask you that we take out that connection to the Lawrence land and that we take out that internal road pattern, which is inconsistent with our proposal. We'd ask council to give direction to staff to delete that connection to Lawrence land and to revise the internal road to match what we've given in our proposal that we've worked with staff to develop. So that is one thing we would ask council to do. Engineering study on other lands. So in your planning report, I'd ask you if you could flip to where page 18, 19, and 20, if you would just find those pages and have them at your fingertips.